Hi guys, welcome back. This is Match Hat number 63, featuring part 2 of my interview with Mr. Chris Avellone, this time focused on Planescape Torment. Planescape Torment is quite simply one of the greatest computer role-playing games ever made. Highly original, really just a unique entry. If you haven't ever heard of it, watch my Match Hat that covered it. But more importantly, track down this game and play it. I guarantee you will not be disappointed. Utterly fantastic game. And here to talk about it, its development, its critical reception, the ideas behind it, is Mr. Avellone himself. So without further ado, here's Chris.
When I first came to interview at Interplay, Marco Green, the division director at the time, he said, so if you're doing a game set in the Planescape universe, how would you start it? And I'm like, oh, I would start from the death screen, and then just tell the story about what happens after that.
Hey, Chief. You okay? You playing corpse or you putting the blinds on the dusties? I thought you were a deader for sure.
He goes, oh, that sounds interesting. Do you want a job? I was like, sure. And so I worked at Dragonplay for a while. And then we had the Planescape license. We weren't doing much with it. And then Fergus came to me one day and goes, hey, we're doing Baldur's Gate. We can license the engine from BioWare. We have the Planescape license. Can you do a Planescape campaign setting with the Infinity engine? And I'm like, sure. And so otherwise, that was really the only parameter to it. And I was just allowed to sort of just grab the reins and go. So just wrote a cool story in the Planescape universe, tried to think of some really cool characters that complemented the license, and then I had a really good, strong lead programmer, lead artist, and just a bunch of just really dedicated people. So I don't know, it was just a lot of fun, and it was kind of under the radar for a while at Interplay. Like Fergus had input, some of the producers had input, but overall that small team understood what the game was supposed to be really well, and we just went from there. And the fact that there wasn't a lot of sort of switchbacks back and forth in terms of where the game should go, that definitely helped a lot. And I'll argue, too, that had a lot to do with how Fallout 1 turned out. I think because Tim and Leonard and Jason, no one at Interplay really felt that Fallout would be more than a B product. And this isn't a big revelation. This has been said before. Because people weren't expecting great things from Fallout, they didn't pay as much attention to it, and they didn't interfere with it so much. So I think that has a lot to do with the final product that came out. And I think Planescape was in a similar situation, although I think Fallout 1 definitely turned out better. There was two strong vision points we wanted to hit. One was, this was kind of personal to me, but over the years of game mastering and even working on the games at Interplay, and playing computer role-playing games, I developed a list of things that I hated about RPGs. Just hated them. And I was like, okay, well, I want to take every single one of those cliches and just break them because I'm sick of them. Like, I don't want any dwarves, like, I don't want any elves, like, halflings can fucking jump off a cliff. I'm fucking sick of those guys. So that was one thing, although I tended to keep that to myself because, that hurts sales. Anyway, the other thing I tried to do was that we wanted to introduce a lot of reversals in Planescape, in the sense of, for example, you'd start on the death screen rather than ending on it. You don't really find out, quote-unquote, your name until the end of the game instead of choosing it first. Like, rats are some of the most dangerous things in Planescape. Like, all sorts of things we wanted to sort of take our RPG cliche and not only break them, but sort of turn them 180 degrees and try and present them in a new light. Like the undead in Planescape, we intentionally made those guys some of the most sympathetic guys in the game. And that was part of our design philosophy, just because we were so sick of how they were portrayed in other games. Like, Fall from Grace is a succubus. Like, she doesn't have sex. Like, I was like, this was during the time when Diablo, like, you could go through, a ton of dungeons, slaughter succubi left and right, and they're the total sex pots. And I thought it'd just be cool, like, why don't we take Fall from Grace as succubus and completely reverse that concept, make her celibate, make her chaste, well-spoken, she's polite, she's one of the nicest people in the entire game. And we just thought things like that would be interesting. And in my opinion, I think it turned out pretty well. We could take a mechanic like death, which in RPGs it was pretty straightforward exactly what death did to you. Like, death made you reload the game, it wasted your time. In Planescape we thought, hey, if we have this opportunity, the campaign setting actually lends itself to experimenting with what death really is. Okay, so with that, why don't we use death as a puzzle tool and sort of another power the player has? Like, when you die in Planescape, you get teleported to other locations when your dead body gets picked up, for example, by the Dustmen, or you can even use it to circumvent traps that would otherwise be lethal, and you actually use it as one of the tools in your arsenal to figure out what's going on in the game. We felt that was pretty important. The other thing was, and this sort of harkens back to the things that I hated about RPGs, is one thing I always noticed in the pen and paper groups we did was our players would choose their alignment before they ever actually got exposed to the game world and had their actions tested, which I always thought was really weird, because you really can't say what kind of character you are until you're actually thrown into those situations. So we took Planescape and we're like, okay, this guy is going to be a blank slate. He wakes up with no memory at all. His personality is there to be shaped the way the player wants based on the actions they're taking in the game and the things that they're exposed to. So it was really important for us to not let the player go, oh, I'm lawful good, I'm chaotic good. We were like, we're going to let the game tell you what your alignment is shifting towards based on how you feel about approaching these situations. And I thought that was a much better way of doing it rather than sort of determining your personality before you even got exposed to the world. We were lucky to have two of the Planescape pen and paper designers come on board at Interplay. One was Zeb Cook, and the other one was Colin McComb. And Colin McComb actually worked with us on Planescape. A lot of the philosophical approaches for each of the factions, that came directly from the Planescape universe. So like Interplay, me, the team, we can't take credit for any of those things, or the slang that they used in the game. Those were things that were already part of the Planescape setting and already made it like really interesting. So there were faction philosophies and how they viewed the world, and we tried to make sure that we were true to those things. The other philosophies that were more player-centric in terms of like how your actions shape your alignment and what does that mean for who you really are by the end of the game. Those were things that we brought into it, but a lot of the other philosophy stuff was core to the Planescape setting. Everyone had to wear a lot of hats, and we worked really, really hard. And I'll tell you, like up until the day of release, we didn't know how that game was going to go, and QA didn't know how that game was going to go. And I was like, this could be the worst thing that we throw out of the shelves. And it wasn't. And I'm thankful for that. I think the reason that archetype kept perpetuating itself is actually Ravel's fault. Because of when we were designing the character, because of how she exists, like her whole premise is that she's basically like this tree that sort of has its branches throughout the planes, and she sort of touches all these different souls in existence. When we did more Icewind Dale games and like Heart of Winter, there would be women that would show up in that who were usually either blind or couldn't see very well. Those characters would be manifestations of Ravel's branches of the Great Tree. And so whenever I had an opportunity to sort of write one of those characters like I did for Icewind Dale, I would actually include hooks to Ravel in there to sort of communicate to the players that, hey, she exists on multiple levels of existence, and she's touching each of the souls of these characters here. These are each sort of like different representations of her personality. And I just thought that was a cool thing to do. as game developers, we have a responsibility to make sure that the game world is reacting to those choices in how you develop and how you build your character. And we really try to make sure that we hit that in Alpha Protocol. And we actually reduced resources from other areas, like we reduced the cast of characters in order to actually add more reactivity to the environment. I think that was really important. As far as New Vegas goes, with people being happy with that, if you liked Fallout 3, imagine Fallout 3 with just more cool stuff in it, and I think folks will be pretty happy with that.